We almost could have included a Christmas carol this morning. It's the fourth Sunday of Advent, so we stayed with Advent hymns, but maybe we should have included a Christmas carol this morning. After all, our gospel begins like this. Now, the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. That's how Matthew begins his version of the Christmas story, and he tells all he has to say about the birth of Jesus in the next 7.5 verses, all of which we heard this morning. So it's like it's Christmas on the fourth Sunday of Advent. Though you might have noticed that Matthew fails to mention so much of what we've come to expect to hear when we hear the Christmas story. Nothing about the angel Gabriel coming to Mary with a bold proposition. Nothing about her agreeing to become the mother of God. Nothing about Mary's traveling with haste to see her cousin Elizabeth. And nothing about the song Mary sang upon her arrival there. My soul magnifies the Lord, my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. Nothing about why Mary and Joseph had to go to Bethlehem. Nothing about that registration. And nothing about there being no room in the inn when they got there. Nothing about shepherds keeping watch over their flocks by night, or the angels who brought them glad tidings of great joy. And nothing about what these shepherds told the new parents and how Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. We don't hear any of those details in Matthew's brief account of Christmas. Those details are all from the gospel according to Luke. Luke, who has much to say about Mary and hardly a mention of Joseph. Now rest assured, you will hear Luke's version of the Christmas, of that first Christmas, here on Christmas Eve. We always hear Luke's version on Christmas Eve. But this morning, on the fourth Sunday of Advent, we hear from Matthew. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. Now while Luke has much to say about Mary and hardly a mention of Joseph, Matthew draws our attention to Joseph and hardly mentions Mary. So I want to tell it again, this Christmas story. I want to tell it, though, explicitly and expressly from Joseph's side. Once upon a time, a man named Joseph and a woman named Mary were engaged to be married. Joseph had been looking forward to this time for all his life. He was engaged. He was to be married to Mary. Even the sound of those words rang in his heart like a song, married to Mary. Joseph looked ahead to his life as a married man, as a family man. He had it all planned out. A young woman who would love him and whom he could love in return. He was handy with his hands. He'd build them a house. She'd make it a home. Their home. And they'd have kids, lots of kids, and they'd raise them with love. They'd share love together, lots of love, starting with the honeymoon and lasting until old age. Joseph, he could see it so clearly. He had it all planned out. All planned out, that is, until the day Mary was found to be with child. What a way to put it. Found to be with child. A turn of the phrase that hints at a secret kept from him until she could no longer hide it. Found to be with child, more like found out. And it's as if his whole world falls apart in that discovery. How could she? It's not just the scandal of it, though it is certainly scandalous. It's more than embarrassing. It's hurtful. It's devastating. Because of what she's done to him, his whole world is turned upside down. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, not so very long ago, his life was a fairy tale. She loved him and he loved her, and all was right with the world. But not now. Not after this betrayal. It's a lot to take in, but after a time, after the shock begins to wear off, Joseph realizes he's got some decisions to make. He's lost the security of predictability. He's lost the security of respectability. With all that he's lost comes no small measure of fear, of uncertainty. So he considers his next steps. He has to decide what to do, carefully, deliberatively. There aren't many options for a man like Joseph. He's a righteous man. Not to say self-righteous or smug. He's just the kind of man who knows right from wrong and tries always to do the right. And the right thing to do in this case is pretty clear. According to the law, he should denounce her publicly. The consequences could be extreme, maybe even a death sentence. But he didn't make the rules or break them. He should denounce her publicly. That's what he should do. He'd be within his rights, and nobody would say different. But he is unwilling to do so. To be honest about it, at least honest with himself, he still cares for her. And besides, exposing her situation would only tell the world of his own predicament. And so slowly, painfully, he decides, given the circumstances, the best thing is to call the whole thing off, to dismiss her, quietly, though. Simply, as painlessly as possible. She can go off and visit a distant aunt, perhaps, or maybe a cousin, and give birth to her illegitimate child there. Maybe someone will even adopt the baby and she'll be able to return home someday. Not that it really matters, though, at least not to him. Not any longer. Not after what she's done to him. In any event, he needs to get on with his life. He needs to begin to pull his life back together again. It'll take time, sure, but he's still a young man, young enough to start over. He'll just sleep on it. Sleep on it one more night. God knows he needs the sleep. He hasn't been getting much lately. And that's when the dream comes. He didn't ask for it, but still it comes like a thief in the night. And like a thief, the dream takes from him all that he had concluded about his situation. The dream steals back all of the decisions he had finally settled in his mind. And of course, in the end, the dream lures him to consider a possibility he could scarcely imagine. That his discomfort might actually be God's way of becoming more manifest in this world. and they shall call him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. What a dream. You know, I think of a different Christmas story and of another man who dreams. I think of Ebenezer Scrooge. You'll recall his conversation with the ghost of Jacob Marley. It goes a little bit like this. "You don't believe in me?" observed the ghost. "I don't," said Scrooge. "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of the grave about you, whatever you are." It's a figure from a dream and a dreamer's response. Now, in Ebenezer's case, it takes 3 more visitations to convince him to turn his life around. In Joseph's case, a single angel and a single visitation does the trick. And Joseph does more than turn his life around. He turns his whole world around. He turns his whole world upside down because of a dream. A dream angel shines light into a new option, into the crack of his resolve to dismiss Mary quietly. A dream angel. What if there's another way forward? What if he were to accept her incredible story on the incredibly thin promise of a dream? What if he were to marry her and raise the child as his own? It's nearly as scandalous an option for him as if he had publicly divorced Mary. The dream tells Joseph what to do, and Joseph does it. And that speaks volumes about Joseph as a man who is much more than merely righteous in the eyes of others. Now, I don't know, it was a dream. Maybe it was actually an angel. Maybe it was just something he ate. Either way, Joseph rises to live into that other option, that unimagined option, the one that hadn't occurred to him before. And if there's a moral to the story, maybe this is it. Joseph chose to be human and humane, and not merely to be good. He chose doing love and showing mercy over merely being seen to be right. The world needs more of that still. Joseph is a role model, if nothing else. And that makes Matthew's story of Christmas as wondrous as Luke's, and maybe even more ennobling. For I'm not always sure I can relate to Mary's incredible yes to the scandalous proposition of a visiting angel, but I can relate to Joseph's reluctance and hurt. That feels real. And I can celebrate the human kindness and goodness he shows when he names the boy Jesus, when he names the boy as his own. That's the Christmas story according to Matthew. We don't hear much more about Joseph after this, but we do know this much. Joseph did what was asked of him then. He did not cast Mary aside. He did not leave her to fend for herself. Joseph chose to be her protector. He was human and humane. He chose love and mercy. And it's a good bet that Joseph became an awfully good dad to Jesus, teaching him the values he himself personified, to be human and humane over being merely good, teaching him to choose love and mercy over merely being seen to be right in the eyes of others. Janet Hunt, a Lutheran pastor and preacher, she sums up Joseph's role with Jesus this way. She says, Joseph must have been an awfully good dad to this boy. We know this through the stories Jesus later told. For where do you think, except from Joseph, that Jesus got the idea that a father always gives good gifts to his children? Where, do you imagine, did he get the image of a father running to welcome home his prodigal son? Where do you think the tenderness in his voice came from when he said we were to address God as Abba, Daddy, if not from his own experience of an earthly dad? I have to believe that Jesus drew from his own experience growing up with Joseph as his father here. Joseph, who abandoned his own pride, his own long-earned sense of right and wrong, who set aside his fear and stretched his own sense of what and who he was responsible for to just be a dad to Jesus, to help shape Jesus' life and his vision in such a way that some of his best teaching was informed by his own experience of an earthly, loving dad. All of this is why, even if Joseph is overshadowed on Christmas Eve in Luke's telling of the Christmas story, Joseph deserves to have his story told by Matthew, if only once every 3 years on the fourth Sunday of Advent. And Joseph deserves his place in every Christmas creche that's put out for display to our very day.